Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We're in Numbers chapter 22. Again, another amazing, interesting, kind of mind-blowing study. Now, it's almost sounding like I'm kind of repeating myself, but I'm not. The bronze snake in the last chapter was another why kind of question, right? And this one is also going to be one of these chapters where we say, okay, what's going on here? And the reason why is because God uses a false prophet as his instrument. Okay, God uses a false prophet as his instrument. And I want to say this even before we get on. This is going to be the story of Balaam. But you might say, well, why does God use a false prophet? And often one of the problems is too, and to dispel, I know part of this is our misconception of what we think is instruments of God. Religiously, we've been taught that God only uses pure and holy instruments. Which, in that case, if that was the case, well, God could not use any of us because, remember, we're all contaminated by sin. It's just a matter of what degree, see, that, you want to measure it. And especially, of course, even in these pagan times, one of the reasons why Israel repeatedly falls into sin, right? Repeatedly, is because of the sin nature. So we're all contaminated, and that's my point. That, we think, well, Moses was holy and pure. Yes, he was. In other words, he was certainly not as bad as Balaam. But just keep in mind, we already saw that Moses disobeyed God, right? Disobeyed God once, and he will not go into the promised land because of that one act of disobedience. So, so part of the kind of understanding this is, one, God is God, and God does as He please, and so we're going to see He's going to use this false prophet to deliver a message. Okay, all right. So here we go. Numbers chapter 22. The Israelites traveled over and camped in the plains of Moab, near the Jordan, across from Jericho. Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was terrified of the people because they were numerous, and Moab dreaded the Israelites. Now remember, I told you everybody around Israel believed God more than the Israelites themselves. The only difference is that they were sinful. The Moabs, they feared the people, and this is another interesting revelation of the sinfulness of man. They feared Israel. And instead of humbling themselves before God, we're going to see this extreme measures that Balak is going to take to defeat them. Okay, so and we're going to yet come up and we're going to see Rahab, who is a harlot, who will say, Yah God is the real God, and she will actually be saved because of her faith. But if you see here that they recognize God is with them, and if he doesn't know it, of course, the false prophet that he hires is going to tell him that the true and living God is with these people. And that's going to be very interesting here. All right, so verse 4, so the Moabites said to the elders of Midian, this horde will devour everything around us, like an ox eats up the green plants of the field. Kind of interesting. Remember when Moses sent the spies out, and when they came back and they said, we're like grasshoppers in their sights, and we can't destroy these, the people across the land right here. Notice they're kind of saying the same thing about Israel, right? He said, since Barak, son of Zippor, was Moab's king at the time, he sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, at Pethor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his peoples. Okay? Again, so Balaam was this kind of seer, but a false seer, not a prophet of the Lord. Balak said to him, look, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the surface of the land and are living right across from me. Please come and put a curse on these people for me, because they are more powerful than I am. And I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed. Now, this was sort of again, remember, everybody was into pagan beliefs and pagan rituals. And they kind of actually believed this. This guy, he was a false prophet. He had no power. And just remember that really people did not have power the way. In other words, if I take up I build a image and I say I'm worshiping whatever God, that God doesn't exist in reality. Okay? So, any pagan gods doesn't exist. But they exist strongly in the minds of people. So what we have, of course, in the biblical narrative, is that God is revealing himself, setting himself apart from this. So notice the very words that Balak will use. Whom you bless, Balaam. Who you bless are blessed. So he's going to hire him. Now later on, we're going to see a kind of again, some of these weird stories of how people viewed certain men. They felt that if they paid them, that they're going to have the gods on their side. Verse 7, the elders of Moab and Midian departed with fees for divinations in their hands. Almost sound like today's ministers, huh? I digress. They came to Balaam and reported Balak's words to him. He said to them, spend the night here, and I will give you the answer the Lord tells me. So the officials of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and asked, who are these men with you? Now, so here's the question now. Is this man a prophet of God? No. We're going to see here the false prophet. Well, what about when Balaam says, I'm going to inquire of the Lord? Well, the question is, what Lord is he referring to? Now, is it possible that God has used Balaam before? It's possible. Remember, God can use whomever he chooses and whomever he pleases. And one other thing, what we're going to see here is God is going to use this false prophet, but before he does, he's going to prepare this prophet for that moment, for this, you can say, we're going to, actually the next 3 chapters, he's going to prepare him to speak his word, and that will be it. And then we will see the outcome of Balaam. Now remember, in Numbers 12, God says that when I choose a prophet, I will reveal myself to him in dreams and in visions. God is doing this to use the false prophet Balaam as a vessel. But only for this time period. Understand, he's not speaking God's counsel to Israel. He's not leading Israel. But for this one instance, God is going to use this vessel. It's a flawed vessel. It is a stained vessel. But as I said, aren't we all? In other words, remember this. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So none of us meets God's standards. The saddest thing about Balaam is that he is going to fix himself as an instrument of destruction and doom. We'll get to that later. Verse 9 again, then God came to Balaam and asked, who are these men with you? Balaam replied to God, Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent this message to me. Look, people have come out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land. Now come, put a curse on them, that I may be able to fight against them and drive them away. Verse 12, then God said to Balaam, you are not to go with them. You are not to curse this people, for they are blessed. Now kind of remember the same words, remember, that Balak said to him? Verse 13, so Balaam got up the next morning and said to Balak's officials, go back to your land, because the Lord has refused to let me go with you. When the officials of Moab arose, returned to Balak, and reported, Balaam refused to come with us. Balak sent officials again, who were more numerous and higher rank than the others. Then they came to Balak and said to him, this is what Balak, son of Zippor, said, let nothing keep you from coming to me. I will greatly honor you and do whatever you ask of me. So please come and put a curse on these people for me. Now keep this in mind right here, because this is Balaam's downfall. It's greed. Okay, verse 18. Balaam responded to the servants of Balak, if Balak were to give me his houses full of silver and gold, I could not go against the command of the Lord my God to do anything small or great. Now this is interesting that Balaam is calling God his God, but he's going to turn out to be a false prophet. And again, greed will be his downfall. And I know it sounds like Balaam is, man, he's a true prophet. It sounds like this. But let's just keep. We're not through with the story. Verse 19. Then he says, please stay here overnight as the others did, so that I may find out what else the Lord has to tell me. Now, right here, you kind of have to stop and think, God's already told you, don't go with them. God's already told you, you're not going to put a curse on these people. They're blessed. So, we're seeing, it's like he's probably salivating over the fact of, man, I'm missing out on the money. But I'll get to that later. Verse 20. God came to Balaam at night and said to him, since these men have come to summons you, get up and go with them, but you must only do what I tell you. When he got up in the morning, Balaam saddled his donkey and went with the officials of Moab. But God was incensed that Balaam was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand on the path to oppose him. Balaam was riding his donkey, and his two servants were with him. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing on the path with him, with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the path and went into the field. So Balaam hit her to return her to the path. And the angel of the Lord stood in the narrow passage between the two vineyards, with the stone walls on either side. And then the donkey saw the angel of the Lord and pressed herself against the wall, squeezing Balaam's foot against it. So he hit her once again. Then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in the narrow place where there was no room to turn to the right or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam. So he became furious and beat the donkey with the stick. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she asked Balaam, what have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times? Now, this is kind of funny, because you would have to stop and think, if a donkey starts talking to you. Now, it shouldn't be as big a surprise to Balaam, who is obviously kind of knows the Lord to some degree. But it still would be kind of like, wait a minute, why is this donkey talking? So verse 29, he says, Balaam answered the donkey, you have made me look like a fool. If I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you. But the donkey said, am I not the donkey you've ridden all your life until today? Have I ever treated you this way before? No, he replied. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel standing in the path with a drawn sword in his hand. And Balaam knelt and bowed his face to the ground. Then the angel of the Lord asked him, why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Look, I came out to oppose you, because what you are doing is evil in my sight. And the donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away from me, I would have killed you by now and let her live. And Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the path to confront me. And now, if it is evil in your sight, I will go back. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but you are to say only what I tell you. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. Now this is a credible, of course, statement here. And it also gives us a glimpse between kind of the spiritual realm versus the physical realm, meaning this. The donkey saw the angel, Balaam did. And it wasn't until God opened Balaam's eyes that he saw the angel in terms of the spiritual realm. The greatest lesson here is how God prepared Balaam. That Balaam was going to go, but he had the wrong motives. This kind of also shows us that no matter, by the way, Balaam's heart is still corrupt. And we will see this later. And this is why I said that Balaam is a vessel that's going to be used at a specific point in time, and that's it. Does it mean that he was right? Does it mean that he was, for example, like Moses? You can't compare the two. But it does mean that God can use whomever and whatever. We see the donkey, that God used the donkey to deliver a message to Balaam. Right? So God can use whatever he wants. God can use whatever vessels he wants, whomever he wants, whenever he wants. And so now, at this point, Balaam is now prepared. Okay? He is a prepared vessel to be used by God. Doesn't mean his heart is right. It just means he is prepared to do what God is going to instruct him to do. Alright. Verse 35 again. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but you are to say only what I tell you. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. And when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the Moabite city on the Anan border at the edge of the territory. And Balak asked Balaam, did I not send you an urgent sermon? Why didn't you come to me? Am I really not able to reward you? Keep this in mind here. As I said, this would be Balaam's downfall. This is what, so really here, this is really what is in Balaam's heart. However, he knows he cannot act upon this. Why? Because God has already prepared him, and he's already seen what God can do. Verse 8, Balaam said to him, look, I've come to you, but I can say anything. I'm saying, look, I have come to you, but can I say anything I want? I must speak only the message God puts in my mouth. Now this is true. God has already prepared him for that. So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kithra Hazah, and Balak sacrificed cattle and sheep and sent for Balaam and the officials who were with him. And in the morning, Balak took Balaam and brought him to Bamith Baal, and from there he saw the outskirts of the people's camps. Now, when he said the outskirts, meaning he was able to view Israel's camps, and God allowed this. Again, amazing story. We're not through with this yet because we're going to see again what is amazing about this statement, this story here is one, the evilness in Balaam's heart. Of course, it's hard for us to understand because we oftentimes think that God only chooses those pure vessels, which you can almost even say, does that even exist, right? But certainly, why to choose Balaam? Well, one interesting thing is that, remember, Balaam was esteemed to this man. Well, we can see in terms of what we can conclude based upon, why God would use Balaam. Remember, Balak had great esteem, and that Balak thinks, and remember he said, whomever you bless is blessed, whomever you curse is cursed. So that's one, and so now God is going to use this voice to bless the people no matter what the price. All right, guys, chapter 23 in the next study. I come out of this, but anyway, chapter 23 in the next study. I'll see you then.